Hello friends, welcome to the channel. Bob here, and I'm going to try to create a video on Starfield today. It's harder than you would imagine. It's one of those games. First of all, what I want to do is talk about hype, and I'm going to talk about Cyberpunk. So Cyberpunk is probably my most hyped game that I can remember for a long time, and like I'm in my early 50s, should we say? I've been playing games for a long time, like late 70s, early 80s. And yeah, looking back, Dragon Age Inquisition, I'm a massive Dragon Age fan, love the first two games. We know how that game turned out. Mass Effect, one of my favourite trilogies of all time. Mass Effect Andromeda, we all know how that one turned out. So Cyberpunk was the game. I was mega hyped, overhyped, super hyped. I love the Cyberpunk universe. I kind of reread loads of books all the time, the William Gibson stuff, you name it, I've read it multiple times. So I was a big fan anyway, and I was looking for a long time before Cyberpunk came out, I was looking for that Cyberpunk experience, like a real immersive experience. And I followed the game. I was thinking, this is it, this is going to be the one. I ordered the special edition, came in a cool, massive yellow box, some great artwork, had a great action or figurine of V on a bot, jumping off a bike, shooting at some dude. Really awesome, looked amazing, really detailed. Probably the best gaming special edition that I've ever bought, I think. And I've kind of got a few lying around. And it turned up. I was unpacking it. As I was unpacking it, I was kind of like downloading the game, so it was all part of the experience. Going through all the memorabilia in the box. There's a load of content in the box, which is really cool. Watching the percentage tick by as my pretty crappy internet was downloading it. Yeah, and it was even the unboxing and the installing the game was an immersive experience. So as you can imagine, my hype was about as high as it possibly could be, and I wasn't disappointed. I know a lot of people had problems with the game when it first came out from a technical point of view, particularly if you were on a console. But for me, it kind of transcended gaming. Like Cyberpunk for me was art. There are obviously things you can pick over, combat maybe you didn't like, or there were some things that you would class as quite generic. But the reason that I generally play games, particularly these type of games, like immersive role-playing games or immersive sims, is for the immersion. That's kind of what I'm here for, and that's where Cyberpunk kind of really transcended gaming, and as I said, really felt like art to me. Not just the immersion as well. Well, it's kind of part of the immersion, but not just the exploring the world and living within the world and experiencing it, but also the characters and the writing, the acting, the characterization. Yeah, and as I said, it was one of the very few games over all of those years I've been playing games that met the hype. Now with Starfield, I was kind of feeling the same, but not particularly, not as high as that, but the hype was high. I ordered the Constellation limited edition thing again, and the controller. Shout out to Dave for letting me know that there was a controller. I had no idea until the day the game released, but I had to order the controller. I've kind of got, I'm one of those kind of like geeks you see on streams where they've got rooms with shelves and all gaming and whatever, comics and memorabilia and stuff all around. Yeah, so I ordered all that stuff. It turned up again. I was installing the game. As I was installing it, I opened up the pack. It comes with a really cool smartwatch, actually. I've been thinking about buying a smartwatch for ages, but kind of now I got one, the Constellation one. So hype was high, and I would say that like going into the game and playing the game, my experience was not the same as Cyberpunk. Not to say that it's been terrible, although some of it is terrible, but the game at the moment, or the game has, because I don't really see how they can change them, to be honest with you, but the game has enough issues in that it wasn't really the experience I guess I was expecting. I know you can get overhyped and you can over expect, but I guess when you play a game like Cyberpunk and you mega over expect and you're mega hyped and it meets those requirements, it reaches those highs, and then you kind of play a game that's been really hyped up by everyone, including Bethesda, and you come into it and it kind of doesn't really meet those highs. There is a certain disappointment, I guess. Again, as I said, maybe unfairly, you can get too overhyped. But I also think it's fair. What's interesting is that when Starfield first came out, pretty much all the reviews were very high, particularly amongst the people who, the general gaming journalists who are not actually gamers really, are they? Let's be honest. A couple of websites gave it 100 out of 100. I don't know what game they're playing. It was certainly not the same one that I'm playing. Even subjectively, I don't see how you can give this 100, but we'll come to that. But then as kind of like the week went on, I mean, the game's not even released properly yet. I think it comes out today. So those of us who've been playing early access, as the release, as the week went along, I saw a couple of other reviews. There was a really interesting review by a fairly big content creator, but not like a mainstream one. He specialised in role-playing games, and he enjoyed it, but there was a lot of caveats. Worth a buy, like Mac at worth a buy. Absolutely ripped the game to pieces. I'm not surprised. I mean, I love Mac, but he's not a big fan of modern gaming, and this has got a lot of modern gaming tropes that he's just not going to like. But also, some of the things that he absolutely tears apart, he's right. The game does have those issues. So it's interesting how the week's gone along. People have started to, I guess, as more people are playing it and they're getting further into the game, they've started to go, hang on a minute, maybe this is not the game that we're hyping up. And that comes to kind of like my experience of the game, which I'll talk about. It's only fairly early stages, so I'm not going to give you a complete review. But what I'm going to do is give you some examples of the good and the bad. So an example would be you're in your base, which is kind of like the constellation building within the first city that you come to. So you're in there, you got a quest, and you want to go and do the quest. The quest is off planet, so you're in the building, not a very big building, to be honest, it's quite small. But you leave the building, you've got a loading screen. You need to get to your ship, so you need to go to the spaceport. You run across to the metro system. You use the metro to get to the spaceport, loading screen. Unfortunately, in the metro system, you can't get immersed in the metro ride, not like Star Citizen, for example. It's just a loading screen. So you get to the port, you run to your ship, you get into your ship. Your ship's tiny, by the way, the first one you get, not big at all. Loading screen. You move through your ship to sit down in your seat. You might argue that this is a cut scene, but essentially it's a small loading screen. So you want to sit down in your seat, small loading screen. You want to take off from the planet, loading screen. So you get into space above the planet you've just come from. You want to travel to where you're going, loading screen. You get there, you kind of use this. You kind of look on the map to find out where your quest is. You select where you want to land, loading screen. Get out of your seat, small loading screen. Get out of your ship, small loading screen. Look around to where you need to go for the quest. Maybe the quest is in a building. If it's like a proper building, now bearing in mind from an engine point of view, there's not really much around you. In some cases, you've just got the building. But going to the building, loading screen. You go through the building. Maybe you've got to clear something out or find something. You complete the quest. Now, quite often, and this is the second example from a quest point of view, quite often the NPC wants you to go back to talk to them again. So you've got to go through all those loading screens again. What the game has given you is fast travel. Basically, this game has given you fast travel where you can transcend time and space in one loading screen. And my feeling with this is that they've done this because they've thought to themselves, actually, after about maybe the second or third time, people are going to be sick of loading screens, so we need to do this. And there are some quests that will send you off. Some NPCs will send you off on a quest. You have to come back to them, go off again, come back to them, go off again. There's no mobile communication, referring back to Cyberpunk. Starfield is set 300 years after Cyberpunk, science fiction. There's no mobile communication. You can't even communicate from your ship. You can't even land on the planet where the NPC is who gave you the quest, and then just call them up from your ship. You have to actually get out of your ship, go for all those loading screens to get back to them. I mean, these are like issues that games solved a long time ago. And we're not talking about like immersive breaking issues. There's literally no mobile communication. You can't call an NPC and say, I've just done this quest. they go, oh great, I'll send you some credits, or where do you want me to go next? And then you can carry on your journey from there. You actually have to go all the way back to the NPC to talk to them. Not all the time, but enough for it to be not a good experience. And essentially, all of these loading screens have completely ruined my immersion in Starfield. Now, talking about Star Citizen and No Man's Sky, I did a video a little while ago saying, well, that's what I'm expecting. And then someone left a comment on my video, and I agree. I ended up thinking, yeah, this is basically 100% right. What we're looking for is, they said Daggerfall in space, which is fine. I would go for Morrowind in space, even Oblivion in space. Okay. But that's not what we've got here. What we've got here, if you can imagine playing Daggerfall or Morrowind or whatever, and basically if you're trying to journey somewhere, every couple of minutes, you've got a loading screen. No, every couple of minutes, every 30 seconds, you've got a loading screen. Now, I'm not saying that Morrowind and Oblivion and Daggerfall doesn't have loading screens, obviously, but in any of these games, you can come out of a location. So in Morrowind, I can come out of a location, one of the cities, and then I can look around and I can go where I want without any loading screens, unless I need to go then into a cave or an interior, which is fair enough. But this game is a bit like Morrowind, but they've just chucked in loads of other loading screens. And it's not even though, like, the world looks great, but it's not even as though it's like crazy, like photorealistic. And so some of the loading screens you get are just going from quite small location to small locations. And when I was talking about it before, like I was talking about console limitations, and some people say, "Oh, it's not that. It's just the problem with the problem technically is that this is still the creation engine, but they've just buffed it up." And even coming to terms with the fact that you're not going to get free form flying and landing and travel like Star Citizen and No Man's Sky, even accepting that, because that's probably quite really fair. This is still ridiculous. I mean, technically, to me, it's just embarrassing from a new IP coming out in 2023 from a massive company like Bethesda, with the amount of money they've got to invest in gaming. I've got no idea technically why this is going on. And I know some people will just go, "Oh, that's just how it is," whatever, blah de blah. But it really is. I mean, even kind of, as I said before, even trying to be more realistic and not expecting Starfield or No Man's Sky, even then, this is still ridiculous and incredibly immersion breaking. There are so many loading screens in this game. I've just had a real issue with it. It feels like, in some ways, this game is in pretty much every way, Starfield is not a next generation game from a technical standpoint. Bearing in mind you've got all these loading screens, so it kind of feels like a backward step in some ways. I mean, there's a lot more loading screens in this game than previous Bethesda games. It's not just that, but also just looking at it visually, it doesn't. All the loading required to get between locations just doesn't justify the visuals. I mean, they're pretty, but the planets are, for example, not anywhere near as good looking as Star Citizen or immersive as Star Citizen. But that's fine. They've pumped in a ton of cash to get that immersion. That's kind of what they're going for. So we're not expecting that. I got to a point, as I said, where I wasn't expecting to go down seamlessly and fly down onto the planet and land. That's fine. But what we've got here just seems like technically a step backwards from a game that's supposed to be a next-gen role-playing game. Even if you take into account that it's not a simulation, it's a role-playing game, the loading screens are, quite frankly, ridiculous. And I don't know. I'm assuming it's the engine. But even though the current gen consoles use NVMe drives and stuff, I still see them as a problem as well, as a limitation. I kind of feel that this game was probably designed to make sure that it works on an Xbox, and then all the limitations come across to the PC. There's no way that the PC should require all these loading screens, and in fact, we've seen games where it doesn't require it. So, from a technical standpoint, it's so weird because, the game does look good, but not as good as other games. But why the requirement for all these loading screens? I'm not sure what's happened technically, and it is a mess. and it is incredibly immersion breaking. And that's been a real issue. Moving on to a more positive, I'll kind of cover the positives and negatives of my experiences so far, keeping within topic. So the positives are that when you land on a planet and you're running around exploring, it is very immersive and it's very compelling. You know, just landing your planets, landing your ship somewhere, running around. You use a scanner, and the scanner will bring up points of interest within your range. These points of interest might just be natural features that you can scan to fill in some information about the planet, the ecosystem, and the fauna and the flora and all that kind of stuff. It might be a base like the one you can see in this video at the moment, where you run around, you clear out all the mobs. You might get like an upgrade drop, because the game is a looter shooter. And there are some other things as well. They do become quite repetitive quite quickly, but this is kind of what I'm enjoying the most about the game. So so I'm happy to do it. I know most people won't be interested in this stuff, running around, getting excited about finding a new mineral or metal or whatever it may be, but it is a fairly big part of the game, outside of the main story, which is obviously the main focus. And all of it's done really well. When you get onto a planet, you're wandering around on a planet. It might be you get different weather conditions. I'm recently exploring Mars, which is what this planet is. I don't think it would actually. I'm not sure if there are any winds or whatever on Mars. I guess there must be, but you can hear the wind howling in your helmet. You land your ship, it all looks good, even though it's all automated and loading screens. And you wander around, as I said, and you explore the planets, and you've got busy work on the planets, like data to fill in and all that kind of stuff. So that's all great, and it is compelling. Going back to talk about the game from a technical standpoint again. There was a statement, I think, yesterday from Bethesda, who said that most of the planets are meant to be boring. Or maybe not boring. Most of the planets are meant to be not particularly interesting, because that's just how most planets will be, and that's fine. That's fine, but the crafted planets, where you've got the non-procedurally generated content on, are also very barren and very sparse. I've explored a couple of them now and a couple of moons, and while there is content there, it's not a huge amount of content. I mean, it's not like each tile is full of the sort of content that you've got in Fallout 76, for example. I mean, people talked about, when I was kind of concerned about the tile system and whatnot, I read some other comments, and people were saying, well, the planets are made up of these huge tiles, and each tile is the size of Fallout 76, roughly, I think was what a few people said. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But the issue with that is that it's all very well having like 1,000 planets, and they're all made up of, and they're all much bigger than Fallout 76. But if there's not a load of content available in them, well, in the end, they just kind of become planets that you land on and wander around for a bit and move on. As I said, even the planets that have got custom content created for them. Now, I'm not saying there's not any content. I'm not saying there's not a fair amount of content. On some of them, there's even quite a lot of content. But even so, everywhere I've been to so far feels quite sparse in that regard. And I'm not sure from a technological point of view, loading screens and stuff, and the amount of planets that there are, and each planet is split up into loads of massive tiles. I'm not sure it's working. I think technically they've tried to do too much. They've tried to create too big of a game, and I think it has backfired technically. And I think it's backfired also from the amount of content that you've got. Now, I'm talking about just the content wandering around doing stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of content from a quest point of view, and I'll come to that next. But yes, my overall impression of playing the game from an immersion point of view and being immersed is that I think they've tried to do too much, and I think the engine we're just not up to it. The engine works perfectly fine when you're on a Fallout 76 size tile and you wander around doing stuff. That's fine, but in general, I think from a next-gen game, for what we were looking for and what Bethesda were telling us we were going to get, I don't think it's worked. I think they need to completely rewrite their engine or use someone else's engine. I think that would for the next game. Elder Scrolls 6, I don't know. They're going to use a creation engine again, maybe, but I mean, there needs to be a lot less cutscenes, loading screens in that game. Moving on to the story, I just want to pick up on something you can see in the game right now. This was quite a disappointing moment. You can kind of take over ships and stuff, but it's a bit weird. Like, there are some ships that land and you get onto them, and it won't let you get into them. You know, to kill the crew and steal the ship. I'm not quite sure why. There are some ships where it works, and some ships that it don't. But this was quite a disappointing moment because the ship came down and landed, and I thought to myself, "Oh, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to steal the ship. I'm going to have a new ship." But the ship took off, and when the ship took off, it didn't really seem to know what to do with me. So it clipped me through the ship, and I ended up falling to the ground, as you saw. But this is me exploring Mars, and there are locations that you can go to. There are also locations that you can see that don't come up as like icons on the screen when you've got your scanner on. So you can just go to those as well. You might see a building, turn your scanner on, it's got no information, but if you go there, you might find something. But this is Mars, and as you can see, you know, the content is spread out and it is quite sparse, and at most of these locations there isn't really anything, maybe apart from a box to open. But, you know, I'll move on from that. We've talked about the technical side of things for a bit, and the engine and whatnot, and I'll move on to the story and characterization of your companions and NPCs. So, unfortunately, again, it's like the two things I'm going to talk about. There's kind of like rays of sunshine coming through shit-coloured clouds, basically. That's not. I'm not trying to make out that the game is terrible in any way. It's not, but there is a lot wrong with it. So the writing and characterization is also. It ranges from absolutely terrible to really compelling. Unfortunately, characterization so far ranges from terrible to absolutely terrible. I don't know. I don't know. I'll talk about it. There's a special section at the end of the video that people get triggered by, so I'll leave that to the end so you can ignore it or not. The political stuff, we'll talk about that at the end. But from a writing point of view, some of the writing, some of the quests, kind of, as I say, that they range from really good to just terrible. There's a couple of quests I'm doing at the moment that are quite compelling, and the writing and a characterization of one or two characters makes me feel just immersed, essentially, just part of the world. But most of them really just don't. I mean, the main storyline is average, I would say. It's kind of stealing from Mass Effect. You've got these alien artifacts that when you touch them or pick them up, you hear some tinkly music and some bright lights, and so it's kind of stealing from that. But alien artifacts, fine. It's quite a common trope. And then there are some quests, as I said, that are quite compelling. I'm currently doing one at the moment where I need to infiltrate a group of pirates. And I quite like the way that I got that quest. I got arrested to get the quest. I'm not sure if you have to get arrested, but to get the quest, I was arrested for stealing something. Normally, I would kind of reload that because the stealing system is not that complex or great. No one really saw me, but I still seemed to get captured. When I was captured, you know, the person in charge of the authorities said, "Look, do this job for me, and we'll forget about it." And I think I think this is now a faction quest that I'm going through, and it's a really good quest. But as I said, some of them are not very good. Some of the quests also just send you, just keep sending you backwards and forwards. Loads of fetch quests, loads of go and do this for me, loads of really mundane tasks where I kind of got the impression that they just run out of ideas pretty early on, actually, because you get a lot of mundane task quests pretty much from the start. And then it comes to characterization. So let me go back to Cyberpunk for an example. When Jackie died in Cyberpunk, it was a hugely emotional. I was so I say emotional. I didn't break down and I was in tears, but it was an emotional moment, probably one of the most in any game that I've played, because when you start Cyberpunk, you know, it's immediately, there you go, you're immersed. Like, you meet Jackie, and then it goes through like a short video of you and Jackie becoming friends and doing jobs and gigs together, and all the troubles and conflicts and whatever you got into, and it really cements your relationship. And then just after that, you know, it goes into the game proper. You leave your apartment, you go down, and Jackie's sitting at a noodle bar or whatever it is, and he's eating food, and you sit down and you talk to him. Jackie, obviously one of the greatest characters ever created in a role-playing game, in my opinion. So many other great characters as well, like Rogue, you know, Johnny, obviously. all of them. Yeah, even the small characters, like going in, like the, I can't remember her name, but the girl who runs the bar, and the Moxies and all that kind of stuff. Any character you talk to was so well written and so well realised. That's what made the story there so interesting. Just to compare the quests as well. A lot of the stuff in Starfield is repetitive tasks, but I don't mind that. You know, I've played through Cyberpunk half a dozen times now, and in each of my playthroughs, I've actually completed all the gigs and all the quests, 100% on all of them, and also the police stuff as well. I did all of them on the map, so the map was clear, and I did that 6 times over because you can have content that's repetitive, but it's still interesting. All of the gigs were generally pretty interesting, and they all had, even though you were generally doing the same thing, they all had different stories and different outcomes, and you could approach them in different ways as well. In this game, you don't have any of those options. You know, when you're doing quests, you go to a place. There's pretty much one way of doing it, and that's shooting your way through. I guess you could sneak, but for me so far personally, I've found that generally, you know, you need to at least kill some mobs. So when you go to do a quest, the game doesn't also have the different options available for you to do quests really in different ways, unless you need to talk to someone. There are some quests where you can talk your way through rather than shoot your way through, but it is quite limited. But it was the characterization of all the characters also that made all of these quests, even when you go through and do them again, so interesting. Particularly when you chose a different role, because you would get different chat options and whatnot. And you do get that in this, but what I don't feel is happening in Starfield is any of the decisions that I'm making and kind of having any impact on the world or whatever it may be. If I refer back to Mass Effect again, the characterization in that is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I can still pretty much remember all of the story arcs for all of the characters. Jack's one was quite emotional. Garrus's was amazing. Rex, Miranda, whatever it was, you know, the characters were so well written and characterized and acted, you know, that I felt empathy for them. Unfortunately, in Starfield, all of the characters so far, with the exception of maybe Bennett, who hasn't been in it much yet because I haven't gone to meet him again. Everyone except Bennett, they're all just like cardboard cutouts. It's not very good at all, and that is a real issue because, you know, when I was talking about my reservations of the game, you know, people were saying, well, look, it's a Bethesda role-playing game, that's what we should expect. And I've come into it, and so far, you know, the NPCs in this game are basically less interesting than the original Fallout game. They're less interesting than Morrowind. You know, they're less interesting than, I don't know, Fallout New Vegas. Miles under Fallout New Vegas. And the issue I think is to do with kind of where we are from, like, culturally. You know, I'm going to move on to the political stuff in a minute. Well, Miles move on to it now. So if you don't want to hear this sort of stuff, just move on. I'm quite rational, and I'll be talking about it rationally. But some people, if you disagree with their worldview, then you're a bigot. So if you like, I'm Bob the bigot, whatever. But anyway, there are people who are clearly being employed in all areas at the moment, but we'll keep it. I'm not sure what to call it. Let's call it geek culture. So, comics, TV series, films, games, you know, and books and whatever. You know, in geek culture, there are clearly a lot of people that are being hired not on merit, but on their political view, their ideological view, their worldview, and they all think the same way. And if you don't think the same way, it's actually quite hard to get jobs in these industries currently. And if you do get a job in the industry, you know, we talk about people like Gina Carano, for example, or there are multiple other examples you can give. You basically get forced out of your job. People kind of say, "Oh, this stuff's not as bad as it sounds," but it happens a lot. In the UK, it's actually happening quite a lot in the comedy scene at the moment. And there are quite a lot of UK comics who have created their own YouTube channels and even their own comedy clubs and festivals because they don't think the right way, they can't get work, and their shows have been cancelled and whatever it may be. And that's where we are from an industry point of view, from a geek culture point of view. People have gone. It appears as though some people have gone to university. They've been brainwashed into thinking certain things about men or white people or whatever it may be, and they've left there. And I assume most of them are what seems to be happening. And I have spoken to a couple of people about this. And I spoke to one person who actually was in game media, and they basically said this is what happened to them. They said that they went to university, they were told certain things about certain people, and they kind of felt a bit brainwashed and indoctrinated. And when they left university, they were looking for particular jobs in a particular area where they could spread the word, as it were, spread the ideological word or the woke word or whatever it is you want to talk about, whatever it is you want to call it. And they said they couldn't find a job anywhere where you would think important for whatever reason. So they ended up in the games industry, or they ended up in the comics industry, or they ended up in like doing menial work on a TV show or whatever. And when they got there, they found that most of the people working in these industries thought the same as them, and you were kind of employed based on how you thought, what your worldview was. So what we've got is a lot of people who are coming into the industry, have kind of been brainwashed into thinking a certain way, and it's very cultish. They're very rabid about how they feel. And they're trying to change these industries to fit in with their worldview. This is not unusual. It's obviously happened through history. But I guess what you would say is that this is like passive aggressive fascism to a certain extent, in a sense that they're not going to war or burning books or killing people over it. But those things are happening as well. You know, if you read the wrong books, you're a bigot. If you do this, say this. If you like the wrong tweet on Twitter, you're a bigot. So it's no different from fascism, really, and that's what these people don't seem to think. Don't seem to realise. You know, that if you try to, however it is, whether it's on Twitter or calling people names or whatever it is, if you try to force people into your ideology and to think the way you do, that is textbook fascism. They don't seem to realise that. So that seems to be what's going on. And that's what we're seeing in games. You know, it started off about being inclusive, and we want everyone to be included, and of course we do. You know, when games started adding in, the issue is when they change things and they now try to force it upon you. So recently, a few games have been doing body type instead of male and female. Now, I don't have a problem with there being body type, but why remove male and female? You know, has male and female really become a bad thing? I mean, I'm male, and if I'm playing Starfield, I want to identify as a male. I just want to choose male. It's easy. The game knows what I'm talking about. But in Starfield, you can't do that. You have to choose body type. Now, what does that mean? You know, essentially, it's almost like saying, well, there aren't actually any real genders or sex or whatever you want to call it. But of course there are. And that's what the vast majority of people in the world, nearly everyone, identifies as. What these companies don't seem to realise is that the people who want to choose body type and they want a pronoun, which is fine, they should have that option, are in the vast minority. No matter what the media try to tell you, it's the hugely they are vastly in the minority. And so what they're doing is they're removing options that most people would choose, and they're forcing you to choose the options that they think are the right ones. Now, why are they doing this? Are they doing it out of the goodness of their heart? Are they trying to improve the world? Maybe they think they are, but really they're not. You know, because we've been told that we want everyone to feel included, blah de blah, whatever. But what they're doing is they're removing options, and they're saying to you, you can't use these options. Well, I want to use these options. This is what I am. No, you can't use them because there's a minority of people who think they're wrong. You know, so we're going to choose what you should be selecting. And male and female is one of those things that have been. I think Cyberpunk did it as well, unfortunately. But I don't know why that is. I honestly, I don't know why choosing being male or female is now regarded as a bad thing, or toxic or problematic. To quote some of the words that they use. But that's where we are. And the thing with this is it's not about body type or pronouns or whatever it may be. You know, some people will try and gaslight you. Is that the right word? I'm not up on the hipster jargon. But people will say, like someone left a comment on my live stream where I talked about pronouns. Someone will say, well, it doesn't really matter. Why are you getting angry about it? You know, what you getting angry at means you must be a bigot. So if someone says to you it doesn't really matter, to those people it does matter. like greatly. Like if Starfield released a patch tomorrow that included the male and female option, those people would be on social media going mental, trying to come up with, you know, they'd be trying to boycott the game, get people to boycott it like they did Hogwarts Legacy, etc., etc. Anyone involved in it, they would personally be trying to get them to sack and whatever it may be, forcing their ideology on people essentially. So when people say that, don't be fooled when they say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. You know, you're the problem." It does matter to them, and if this game included or put something in a patch they didn't like, they would go apoplectic. They would be on social media creating a fuss. But when people like myself talk about it quite rationally, or try to talk about it quite rationally anyway, it's a problem, no matter how rational you're trying to be. And as I said, like including this kind of stuff is fine. I don't have a problem with pronouns being in the game. The other thing that people try to say is you don't understand what pronouns are. Well, I do. I know what a pronoun is. I'm reasonably intelligent. You know, we've been using pronouns for thousands of years, so we know what they are. It's another. Is it a straw man argument? Maybe another straw man to try to get you to feel as though you're on the wrong side of whatever. I know what pronouns are. I don't have a problem being in the game. It's not about pronouns. It's not about body type. It's about people, radicals, trying to enforce their ideologies and tell me what I should be, and what I want to be is actually not the right thing. That's what it's all about, and that this spreads through everything. It's not just about pronouns; it's about everything in modern geek culture at the moment. Not just geek culture, but you know what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. There's a load of this stuff, and it's not just pronouns; it's everything. And it's not. And as I said, it's not pronouns; it's what's behind it. You know, it's these ideologies behind it that I feel are quite fascist, even violent sometimes. You know that they will turn to. No different from anyone else through history who's tried to impose their ideology on to someone else who's not interested. And you know, it was when you know people were talking about wanting to be included, inclusivity. That's fine. Put pronouns in the game, put body type in the game, but don't make me choose them. You know, I want to pick male in a game, and I don't see why that option is not there. I say I don't know why it's not there. I'm assuming for some reason male and female has now become some terrible term, terrible bigoted term that you're not allowed to identify as. But that's what I do. And if you want to be inclusive, everyone should have an option in game that they want to identify as. And I don't have that. They're trying to force it upon me. And it doesn't just end with pronouns, obviously. Like as I said in previous video when I talked about this a little bit, you know, as you're going through the game, all of the NPCs, all of the prominent NPCs that are quest givers and stuff are generally of a certain type. All the bad guys, all the kind of like the pantomime bad guys are generally of a certain type. You know, I know you'll guess what type of people I'm talking about on both sides of the fence. Unfortunately, the women, the prominent NPC women in the game are all written fairly similarly. They're all arrogant and rude and got an attitude. I honestly don't think that when women play games, that's how they want to be represented. I mean, for example, I love action and adventure films from the 80s. I love everything about the 80s, but action adventure films, particularly, like, you know, I'll happily chuck on an Arnold Schwarzenegger film or a Sylvester Stallone film and just have a whale of a time. But there are some, but you know, in 2023, even myself, who's kind of sick of this stuff, sometimes I'll watch the films and there'll be something in there that I think, oh, a bit cringe about that. I don't like that. So even as men who enjoy action adventure stars from the 80s, we don't like everything about it now. And I'm sure that there are many women out there who are watching these games. They've got their head in their hands thinking, that's not what I'm like as a woman. I don't want to be represented in that way. I don't want to be obnoxious and rude and whatever. And that's what most of them are. You've also got these weird things. I was running around the first main planet. I can't remember what it's called, Jemson or something or whatever, where the first city is. I was running around there. I was coming across all these industrial locations where people were working, and they were all women. You know, you were coming across these. I don't know what they were doing. It could have been anything from research to digging up oil or whatever. And all of the NPCs were women. And I'm thinking, this is weird. Like, who sits in a room at a meeting in a games company and decides this kind of stuff? Well, the sort of people that I was just talking about. And as I said before, the same with pronouns. It's not about the fact that they're all women. It's what's behind it. It's the people behind it. The fact that these people have sat down and decided this because that's what they want you to, that's what they want to push upon you. That's what they want to show you. They want to show you the world in an unrealistic way. Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. It's like when you get to the first main city. I was wandering around. I thought, these NPCs are weird. And I was examining the NPCs, and you can see that they're procedurally generated. But it kind of clicked home after about 10 minutes. What's happened here? Someone has got, whoever's done the algorithms for NPC procedural generation, they've sat down and they've said to themselves, and this is no word of a lie, this is what these people are like. We've seen it a number of occasions, and you can tell just from reading between the lines. The person who's done this has sat down and said, I'm going to weigh the algorithm so it produces people of the type that I think that should be shown, should be on the screen. There should be more of them. And they pat themselves on the back saying, oh, is it probably a white person, right? As a white person, pat themselves on the back. I'm going to get loads of Twitter bucks for this. You know, I'm going to feel so justified in what I've done. But what they haven't done is they haven't applied logic. So what we've basically got here is ideology over logic. It's ideology over creativeness. Because what they've done, they haven't understood the system. So you've got loads of people wandering around of a certain type, and they've got loads of features like hair and whatever that don't suit them. They don't match. Now this person, someone who wanted to defend this kind of stuff, if you're rabidly on that sort of side, might say, oh well, it's 300 years in the future. People from all over the world can have different hairstyles now and whatever. But that could be the case, but that's not what's happened here. Because some of the NPCs look so stupid from a feature and a hair colour and a hairstyle point of view that's not what's happened. Someone has sat down and they've created the algorithm to generate NPCs with their ideology in mind, but they haven't thought about it logically. So they haven't thought about, but what I need to make sure is that obviously hairstyles are authentic and whatnot. A lot, and it's weird because a lot of people, a lot of these ideologues, will go on about cultural appropriation and hairstyles and makeup and looks and whatever it may be. But they haven't thought about that. All they've thought about is patting themselves on the back for generating loads of NPCs of the type they wanted to generate, for whatever reason, ideological reasons, obviously. But they haven't thought about it like logically or mechanically or atonomically. Is that the right word? So what you've got is loads of people with features and hairstyles and stuff that don't match. They look stupid. As I said, they look stupid, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that maybe someone from a certain country might change their hair or whatever it is. They just actually look stupid because that's how they've generated it. But they haven't thought about it. There's no creativity. There's no logic. There's no science. It's all ideology. And that's why these decisions are being made. And that's the big issue. As I said, it's not about any of these individual things. It's not about the fact that you've got, women working in oil rigs, even though I imagine they would probably find that quite difficult. And I'd imagine most of those incredibly horrible physical jobs are mostly done by men, just because it's very physically demanding. I'm not saying that a woman couldn't do it, but that's the thing. But what they've done is they've thought to themselves, no, we don't want that. What we want to do is we want to show women doing these jobs. And that's fine. And pronouns are fine. And having a diverse city, although it breaks immersion because it doesn't really make any sense. It's not diverse, though, actually. We talk about diverse, but it's not diverse. They call it diverse, but they call it diverse because it's a diversity of the people that they want to see. It's not actually diverse. It's a bit like changing the meaning of the word racism. They've changed the meaning of the word diversity. It's not diverse if most people look the same, but with stupid hair and features. It's not about any of those things individually. It's about what's behind it. It's about the ideology behind it and the people behind it. They're not very nice people. They use bullying and they use violence in some cases to try and push this ideology. And that's what the issue is. It's got nothing to do with being a bigot or a racist or a homophobe or transphobic or whatever it may be. It's about the ideology. It's about what's the word I'm looking for? It's about the propaganda. It's about what they want to push. It's about the activism, and all of it sucks. It's just not done very nicely. And I mean, like back in the, I kind of, I'll quote a quotation. I'll quote Winston Churchill. I think it was, who said, "If you're not a liberal in your 20s, then you're a moron." And he also said, if you're not a conservative in your 50s, you're also a moron. And there's some truth to that. You know, in my 20s, I was very, very left wing, very rebel. You know, I believe that we could change the world by not necessarily violence against humans, but by causing a fuss. And as you get older, you realise that actually, maybe this is not the best way of doing it. And in general, you know, these kind of insurrections or uprisings or whatever lead to bloodshed. And what you also mostly find is that these activists are people who will never experience the hard side of it. It's all very well sitting in your ivory tower in London, going, "Oh yeah, this country should rebel or do this or whatever." But if rebellion turned up at their door and knocked on it, and was going to negatively affect them, you can bet your bottom dollar that they will not be interested anymore, and they'll be cowering in the corner. So that's really what I think. You know, I think that having anything in a game, for example, that makes people feel inclusive is fine, as long as you're not trying to force it on everyone else. As long as you're not using it as a battering ram to you know, to push your ideologies onto other people. And that's exactly what's happening in pretty much all areas. And as I said before, some people say it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter, just get on with it. Well, if it doesn't matter, why are you even bringing it up? You know, because obviously it does matter to you. And also, if it doesn't matter, then why change it? Why change male and female to body type? If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. You know, why change it? But it's difficult to have, like, not just like one side, both sides. It's difficult to have a coherent conversation with anyone about politics. I mean, it's always been difficult. You know, a phrase that I can't remember it was, like my grandma or granddad said to me when I was a small person. You know, don't talk to friends, don't lend friends money, and don't talk about politics. And I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good. Summary of stuff, because we can't talk about it. People find it difficult to use logic. It's all emotion, and I think that's part of the problem. But yeah, this has been a long video, but it's just something that I wanted to talk about. I know some people will listen to that and think that, oh well, Bob's this, but I just unsubscribe. I really couldn't give a toss. I just think it's something that we've got to a point now where we need to come back to some sort of equilibrium again. And if you want to be inclusive, if you want to include everyone, that's fine. Although I think that's a bit of a straw man argument again. But I think when it gets to a point where you're trying to force options on people, that's what it's about. As I said, I'm not repeating myself. It's not about the options itself. It's about removing options and forcing options on people that you think are the right ones. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me wanting to choose a male. It doesn't make me a bigot or a bad person or whatever. So why not include that in games? That's what most people are going to choose, male or female. So you're excluding the majority because you think it's good for a minority. Whereas as long as everyone, minorities or whatever, you know, can choose what they want, it shouldn't be a problem. But there we go. Yeah, that was a bit of a video, incredibly long. I'm sure it'll go down well. But there you go. As I said, you know, never lend friends money, and never talk about politics. Never lend friends and family money, and never talk about politics, friends and family. It always turns out bad. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear any reasonable conversation that you've got. I certainly don't want people to use this video as an excuse to rattle their sabres, whatever side you're on. I don't want to hear radical nutters on one side going on about being a bigot and all that kind of stuff. But at the same token, I don't want anyone to use the video as an excuse to be passively racist. Oh yeah, bloody hell, get off my land kind of stuff, because that's not the place for it. Bugger off, unsubscribe. Please unsubscribe. I literally don't care. I don't do this to subscribers. It's not a problem. But anyway, let's sum up. Starfield is an absolute mess for the most part. But when it works, it's actually very good. I know that's confusing. And I'm hoping as the game goes on, the writing and all the characterization and stuff gets better. But it's difficult, you know. I don't think my expectations were too high from a story and a characterization point of view. But when all the characters are just basically cardboard, it's difficult. You know, it's difficult to feel any empathy for them at all. I was looking for one of my favourite things in Mass Effect was going through the companion stories, and I was really looking forward to it in this, and I'm just not anymore, which is a shame. Maybe I'll kind of go through the quest and spend most of my time playing the game. Just exploring planets and stuff. The other issue here, of course, is that I would not pre-order another special edition Bethesda game again. You know, not unless there were some assurances that they weren't going to plague the game with their ideologies. So I know it doesn't mean much. People always say, "Oh, I'm not going to buy their game anymore," but I generally won't pre-order another Bethesda game again after this one. I will wait and see, and you know, maybe buy it cheap, as a lot of people do, because I just don't. I think that's the thing to do. I think that's all we can do if we want things to change again, so there's some more equilibrium. That is just not support it with our space bucks, you know, and that's happening a lot. You know, I mean, the ESG or the ERG is not helping, you know, because there's this thing at the moment where if you fit into these, categories, then you get funded. I think that can be the only way that companies like Disney are surviving. Maybe they're being bankrolled by people, I don't know, but this whole ESG thing, where you get funding based on your political outlook in games and films and stuff, is probably not helping. But yeah, I think that's the only way that you can hurt them in the pocket, and they'll realise that they need to change some of this stuff. They need to stop forcing their stuff on us. But there you go. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon.